Here are the answers for the section 4-2 homework, starting on page 128, the orals. We're asked to square the polynomial. So in number 1, we're given the polynomial 2t. We're told to square that. That would be putting it in parentheses and then squaring it. Let's apply the rule about taking a product and raising to a power. You distribute the power to each factor in that product. So start with the 2 and raise it to the second power. Then take the t and raise it to the second power. This answer is 4t squared. Number 7, we're given this binomial, we're told to square it. So let's first show that by putting it parentheses and then squaring it. Now let's work this out. This means 2a minus 1 times another 2a minus 1. Now we can use the distributive property to multiply this binomial times this binomial. Some people call this FOIL, first, outer, inner, last. Multiply the 2a to that 2a. 2a times 2a is 4a squared. Then multiply the 2a to the negative 1. 2a times negative 1 is negative 2a. We are done using this first term. Now let's come over here to this negative 1 and distribute it to both the 2a and to the negative 1. Negative 1 times 2a is negative 2a. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. This term and this term are like terms and will combine. So the final answer is 4a squared minus 4a plus 1. In number 13, we're given a binomial times a binomial and asked to simplify it. This is a lot like the one we just did, where we had 2a minus 1 times another 2a minus 1. The technique is called the distributive property, or some people refer to it as FOIL. The letter F tells you to multiply the first terms together. The first term from that parenthesis times the first term from that parenthesis. X times x. That makes x squared. The letter O tells you to multiply the outer terms together. That would be the x multiplied over to the 3. X times 3 is positive 3x. The letter I tells you to multiply the inner terms together. That would be the 1 times the x, which is 1x. The letter L tells you to multiply the last terms in the parentheses. That would be the 1 times the 3. This term and this term are like terms and will combine together. X squared plus 4x plus 3. Number 15, we have a binomial times a binomial. The technique to multiply them is called FOIL. A times a is a squared. A times the negative 1 is negative a. Now the inner terms, 4 times a is positive 4a. And now the last terms, 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. This term and this term are like terms and will combine together. A squared plus 3a minus 4. Number 17 has that same pattern, a binomial times another binomial. We're going to use FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. Now the inner product, the 5 times the x, that's positive 5x. And now the last terms, the 5 times the negative 5, that's negative 25. This term and this term are like terms and will combine. We get x squared minus 25. You may notice that in problem 7, problem 13, and problem 15, our answer after doing FOIL has 3 terms. This is a trinomial. But in number 17, we did FOIL, and our answer only has 2 terms. What was the difference? The difference was in number 17, we have x plus 5 times x minus 5. This number and this number are opposites of each other. That caused those middle two terms to cancel away when we combined like terms. Number 27, let's multiply these using FOIL. 1 times 1 makes 1. Now the outer product, negative 4y. Now the inner product, positive 4y. And then the last terms, positive 4y times negative 4y makes negative 16y squared. This term and this term combine together. The final answer is 1 minus 16y squared. Again, this is a binomial. Perhaps you predicted that that's what it would look like when you saw the original problem, because positive 4y and negative 4y are opposites of each other. Now number 33, we do not have a binomial times a binomial this time. We have a monomial being multiplied to a 5-term polynomial. Let's use the distributive property. Multiply the 4x cubed to every term that is inside that polynomial. Let's talk our way through this one. 4x cubed times 12x to the 5th makes 48x to the 8th power. I multiplied the coefficients, 4 times 12, that got 48. And when I multiplied the variables, I used the rule about adding the exponents. 3 plus 5 makes an exponent of 8. Now let's multiply the 4x cubed to the second term in there. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12, and x cubed times x to the 4th is x to the 7th. Now let's multiply 4x cubed to that next term. 4 times 2 is positive 8, and x cubed times x squared is x to the 5th power. Now multiply 4x cubed to the negative x. We get negative 4x to the 4th. Finally, multiply 4x cubed to the 9. We get positive 36x cubed. None of these are like terms because the variables are all different every time. So here is our final answer. To get that correct, we had to be able to multiply coefficients, but we also had to multiply variables by adding the exponents. Now page 129, the written. We're asked to simplify these, so it's a lot like the ones that we just did. We have to recognize the formation. What are the things being multiplied? They are binomials. So the technique is to use FOIL. X squared times x squared is x to the 4th power. Now our outer product, x squared times 1, that's positive x squared. Now our inner product, 3 times x squared, that's positive 3x squared. Now the letter L, meaning last. The last number here times the last number here. That makes positive 3. These are like terms, so they combine together. We get x to the 4th plus 4x squared plus 3. Number 3 has that same format, a binomial times a binomial. Let's use FOIL. 1/2 n times n is 1/2 n squared. 1/2 n times negative 2 is negative n. 3 times n is positive 3n. And 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Now combine the n terms. So the final answer is 1/2 n squared plus 2n minus 6. Hopefully you see the technique for FOIL, taking the first thing in the parentheses and multiplying it to this one and to this one. Then take the second thing in that parentheses and multiply it to this one and to this one. Let's use FOIL to do number 5. 0.3x times 0.3x makes 0.09x squared. 0.3x times to negative 1 makes negative 0.3x. Now our inner product, positive 1 times 0.3x makes positive 0.3x. And now our last, positive 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Combine the x terms together. 0.09x squared minus 1. Number 19 is a binomial times a trinomial. We're going to do this with the distributive property. Start with the first term in that parenthesis and distribute it to all three terms in the second polynomial. A times a squared is a cubed. A times negative a is negative a squared. A times negative 1 is negative a. Now switch from using the a over to using the negative 1 and distribute it to all three terms in the other parentheses. Negative 1 times a squared is negative a squared. Negative 1 times negative a is positive a. Negative 1 times negative 1 makes positive 1. Let's look for like terms. There's only one term that goes to the third power, so our answer starts with a to the third power. Now let's look for the a squared terms. We have negative 1a squared and another negative 1a squared. Those combine to negative 2a squared. Now let's look at the a terms. We have negative a and plus a. Those cancel away. Now the constant, we have a plus 1. So here's the final answer. Number 37, find the value of k in this equation. We're asked to solve the equation for k. Let's work on the left side and do FOIL. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times k is positive 2xk. Negative k times x is negative xk. And negative k times positive k is negative k squared. Let's keep the right side of the equation the same as it was. Notice that there's a 2x squared on both sides. Using subtraction, those cancel each other away. Notice that there's a negative k squared on both sides. If you add k squared, those will cancel each other away. On the left side, we have like terms. Let's combine them. 2xk minus 1xk makes 1xk. And that's equal to 3x. Let's get k alone by dividing away the x that's in front of the k. We get k equals 3. For the review assignment, we're going to page 126, the orals, and we're asked to simplify. This is when we were first practicing the exponent rules. Y to the first power times y to the second times y to the third makes y to the 1 plus 2 plus 3. The rule about multiplying variables is to keep the variable and add the exponents. The answer is y to the sixth power. For number 15, we want to do a division problem where the base is a 7. The rule is to keep that 7 and subtract the exponents. So the answer is 7 to the 1r power. Number 17 is another division problem. And again, the bases are the same. The base is x, the base is x. Just like how in the last one, the base was a 7 both times. So you keep the base and subtract the exponents. I'm taking the exponent from the numerator and subtracting the exponent from the denominator. This makes x to the 2 minus 2a, because negative a and another negative a is negative 2a. For number 31, we're given a polynomial and we're asked to square it. So first, let's put it in parentheses and show squaring like this. Now let's apply the rule that we learned. When you have a product being raised to a power outside parentheses, you distribute that power to everything that's in that product. So start with the -5 and square it. -5 squared is positive 25. Now go to the y to the 3rd power and square it. That makes y to the 6th power. Page 126, the written. We're asked to multiply these monomials together. Start with the numerical coefficient. 12 times -3. That's -36. Now work with the letters. We have r to the 1, and we're timesing by r to the 2. That makes r to the 3. Now the letter s. We have s to the 1, and we're timesing by s to the 2. That makes s to the 3. Now the letter t. T to the 2 times t to the 1. That makes t to the 3. The rule I was using there was about adding the exponents. Okay, number 19. We have a fraction inside the parentheses, and we're raising to the 3rd power. First, let's simplify that fraction. Let's make this as nice as we can, and then raise to the 3rd power. So inside those parentheses, we can reduce the 12 and the 20. 12 and 20 both divide by 4. 12 divided by 4 leaves 3, and 20 divided by 4 leaves 5. So far we have it reduced to 3 over 5. Now let's work with the variables. C to the 2 divided by C to the 4. To divide variables, you subtract the exponents. So we have C to the 2nd power left over. 4 take away 2 makes 2 C's remaining in the bottom. They're still in the bottom because there were more C's in the bottom to begin with. For the letter B, we're going to subtract the exponents. 3 take away 2 makes a single B left in the top. The reason it's in the top is there were more B's in the top to begin with. On the outside of the parentheses, we're raising to the 3rd power. Let's apply the rule about taking a product and raising to a power. You distribute that power to everything in the product. Start with the 3. 3 to the 3rd power is 27. Now do the letter B. B to the 3rd power is b cubed. Now let's go in the denominator. 5 to the 3rd power is 125. And now the c squared. C squared to the 3rd power is c to the 6th power. Number 23. We have a monomial and we need to square it. And then later we're going to add something. Exponents comes before adding. So let's distribute this exponent to every factor in those parentheses. 2 squared is 4. X squared is x squared. Y squared is y squared. Now let's go over here on this part. We have some things being multiplied together. Multiplication happens before the adding. So we need to multiply all of this together and write down the result after the adding sign. Let's start with the numerical coefficients. -2 times 4 is -8, times by -3 makes positive 24. Now the letter x. X times another x is x squared. Now the letter y. This y times this y makes y to the 2nd power. These are like terms because the variable names are x squared y squared and x squared y squared. They match, so we can combine them together. 4 plus 24 is 28 x squared y squared.